Good evening and welcome to part one of Pushing for Progress, a three-part panel series from March On and SEIU. I'm Andy Pringle, the Political and Strategic Campaigns Director for March On, and I'm excited to see everyone joining us tonight. This panel series is dedicated to learning from the lessons of 2020 and planning for 2022 and beyond, with three events focused on pivotal states. Tonight in Georgia, which flipped blue in a big way and gave Democrats control of the Senate on March 25th. On March 25th, in Florida, where Democrats underperformed expectations, and on April 1st in Texas, where on-the-ground infrastructure building could make the state the next one to flip. Before I hand it over to our moderator, you can join us in tweeting our highlights with the hashtag Pushing for Progress. I want to thank some of the individuals not only who have made this panel series possible, but whose work helped to make the huge wins of 2020 possible. Vanessa Rubel, Executive Director of March On, Penelope Chester, Chief Operations Officer of March On, Chris Smith, March On's National Campaigns Director, Macy Hall, March On's Georgia State Director, and last but certainly not least, Kairu Crimes, Political Capacity Coordinator at SEIU. That's a dream team right there. We're already building our dream team for 2022, and we need you on it. That's why we're asking everyone in attendance tonight to pledge to register 5 people to vote between now and the next election. State legislators around the country are working to make voting harder, so we need to get people started, registered, and ready now. Go to marchon.org/pledge to pledge to do your part. Now let's dive in. Since the victory in Georgia, we've heard a lot of stories about how we got this remarkable turnout just because people were voting against Trump. But that's not the real story. The real story is the people on the ground, and the people you see on this panel tonight worked around the clock for months and years to register voters, to get them to the polls, and to communicate a clear, inspiring message, not just about what voters could get rid of if they showed up, but what they stood to gain. Talking about the values we share, the people's lives could get better, their community stronger. That's what made the difference in Georgia. So tonight we want to learn more about what happened on the ground from the people who made it happen, what lessons we can apply elsewhere, and what the future holds for this state in 2022 and beyond. To get us started, I'm honored to introduce Deborah Scott, CEO of Georgia Stand Up. Georgia Stand Up is a think and act tank that advocates for economic inclusion, community empowerment, and progressive civic action. When I talk about people on the ground doing the work for years, Deborah is on that list. She's been working for decades to help Georgians get engaged in the civic process. So she understands that what moves people to vote is what's happening close to home. Please welcome Deborah Scott.
Well, thank you, Andy, and thank you, March On and SEIU, my peeps, for having me here tonight, and to thank everyone for turning into this important discussion. Andy, you said it exactly right. People want to hear these kitchen table issues about jobs and healthcare and the economy. It's true about this election that so many people are out of work and have been out of work and struggling for so long in this pandemic. Kids are out of school for months, and it's important to cover and connect these issues to what's happening in their daily lives with their families. But anyone who works in these campaigns knows that a lot more is going on and does go on in order to win this campaign. So let's talk about some of the people who have done the work on the ground here in Georgia, and let's learn from each other. So the first person I would like to introduce is John Taylor. And, you know, John is my people. We've been raised by the same folks, Reverend James Orange and the Blue Crew and everybody here at the People's Agenda and Georgia Stand Up. So I know John personally, but John is the Deputy Director of Governance Campaigns for SEIU. And SEIU is the sponsor of tonight's event and is the force on the ground for organizing. And I know that for myself. Next, we have Christopher Bruce, He is the political director of ACLU Georgia, which has been on the front lines to fight for the civil liberties for decades now. And also joining is Terrence Woodbury, partner at Hit Strategies. We were just on a panel a couple weeks ago together. And Terrence's polling and research focuses on people of color and millennials who have become the driving force of electoral trends here in the USA and certainly here in Georgia. His research is impeccable. And we also have Fanika. Fanika Miller is the organizer. I think you got a promotion, but it says organizer of Middle Georgia for Black Voters Matter, which works to increase voter engagement in the Black community. And we are certainly partners of Black Voters Matter as well. And also Mondale Robinson, founder of Black Male Voter Project, which works to engage Black men in the electoral process. And we partnered on an event here and did some work here in Georgia together. And finally, Hill Harper, who is the canvassing manager of Care in Action, which is fighting for dignity and fairness for millions of domestic workers in the United States, and most of whom are women. Will is also the director of the HBCU marketing at ESPN. EPSN, is it EPSN or ESPN?
No, ESPN.
That's what I thought, ESPN. So thank you all for being here tonight and sharing your unique perspectives. But we want to start by asking questions to each of you. So we're going to put your questions in the Q&A. So as things come up, go ahead and type your questions in. So we're going to start with the questions we have. And the first one is for Terrence. Terrence, we'd like to start with you because as we understand this data, we know that we always have to start with the numbers and start with what the facts are. And so can you tell us how Georgia got here? What's the reality? What happened? We flipped it, or we thought we were going to flip it before, but it hadn't been flipped since Bill Clinton in 1992. And, not having a Democratic senator for more than 15 years now. And then now we have the election of Joe Biden and 2 Democratic senators. So Terrence, what's going on? To set the groundwork for us.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And thank you, March On, for having me. The first thing I think we have to start by doing is giving a great deal of gratitude to the voters and organizers of Georgia. America and the world owes Georgia a great deal of gratitude. And really, Deborah, what happened is Black folks showed up and showed out. I've been really characterizing it as the pain and power of Black voters. The pain of Black voters that we saw during the protests of 2020, when the streets of Atlanta and urban cities across Georgia began to uprise and express frustration with the criminal justice system. The pain and correlate, and we saw the correlation of that where those protests that were happening during the summer of 2020 were happening at the same time as early voting in the Democratic primary. And we saw a surge in voting around the same time as we saw political protests. The pain and power are Black seniors who were the most disproportionately affected by the pandemic, the most likely to be infected by this virus, to be hospitalized by this virus, and to die from COVID-19. That pain translated into them being the most likely voter in Georgia, right? We saw seniors reach their 2016 turnout before Election Day. Mm-hmm. They had reached 100% of their 2016 turnout. And we saw the same thing happen in the runoff, where for the first time, in any election I've ever done in Georgia, any runoff I've ever done, I've done a few of them, that the Black turnout, which is normally about 50%, under 50% in a runoff of the Black votes that turned out from the general election, that in fact they hit 90% turnout. That's almost every Black voter that voted in November came back and voted in January. That is the and the power that converted Georgia from red to blue.
Good deal. And I can't see, is Fanika on the line? Okay, until she joins us, let's go ahead to Will. So Will, Gen Z has been a part of this whole move to flip Georgia. What's your perspective on the power of really Black youth in this election and other youth, but that whole Gen Z perspective? How did you find this election, and what do you think made the difference for you all?
I think the difference for us was the candidates that were up, that were running this time. So for instance, me, the first person that I was able to vote for was in the 2016 election. So it was a little different seeing how the tables kind of turned this year. Just with the whole canvassing operation, Gen Z came out, a lot of millennials came out just because of COVID. And we had a lot of college students that were actually able to kind of pitch in. And so a lot of college students that were either home because of COVID or they're taking classes online, that kind of incentivized them to be able to move their schedule around to where if they wanted to kind of get activated within the community, they were still on a high from the protests and everything. So they're trying to figure out how exactly they can be involved and kind of change things. And so the canvassing operation that we had on the west side of Atlanta really helped out a lot. So throughout both election cycles, we had close to 500 canvassers. And so out of that 500, about 150 to 200 were millennials and just young African-American kids that just wanted to help. And the pay was more than what they were getting paid elsewhere. And so that kind of gave them even more of an incentive to bring their friends. And so a lot of them came to the table with not a lot of knowledge, but by the time they left, they had plenty of knowledge to go home and to also help others register. And we also had different sessions where we made sure that all the canvassers were registered to vote, but also made it to where if they had anyone else that they needed to register, we had people set up for them to get registered.
So how do we keep them engaged now that we did that? Because we did that as well and had a lot of young people. But what did you do to keep them engaged, and what should we be doing now to keep them engaged?
It's really just the momentum and realizing that everyone works off of social media. Now everything that gets posted gets reposted one way or another. And so just keeping them engaged. I would say hosting events year round, not just around the election cycle, whether it's virtual events like this for us to get more information, or whether it's in-person events. And so personally with Peaches to the Polls organization that was started out here, we had different block parties. We had a drive-in showing of Good Trouble. And these are things that the youth were engaged with and were willing and open to kind of contribute to. And so I think that if we have events and we host different panels like these to drive the knowledge and just kind of listing what's at stake, it'll keep everyone engaged.
Good deal. And just want to remind everyone that if you have questions along the way, go ahead and pop them in the chat and we'll come back to them in a little bit. And I think, thank you so much for that, Will. We're going to come back to that because, you know, you all are the future and the present. And so the one thing we need to know is how do we keep you all, you know, really engaged in this process. So Fanika, how are you? How you doing?
I am well. Thank you all so much for having me.
Good. Well, you know, Black Voters Matter threw down, right? That's what y'all do. Shout out to Latasha and Cliff and you and Wanda. So thank you so much for everything that y'all did. So how did you see this campaign from your perspective? What did Black Voters Matter do to keep organizations and individuals engaged throughout the state? Because you all have a unique way in which you organize from within. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, first of all, every organization across the state did amazing work throughout the general and again in the runoff campaign. You know, I think everybody has their sweet spot that they, you know, where they can reach folks and do their thing. But our organizing style is definitely unique, right? We lean into the culture. We are authentic in our space. We talk to our folks, we meet people where they are, and we lean into the power of local infrastructure. We find folks in communities, or they find us, right, who may be organizing in church basements, or, you know, they may not have a formal organization. It may be 1 or 2 or 3 people. It may be a group of sweet little old church ladies who are calling through the phone book or church rosters to reach out and say, hey, we need you to make sure you get out to vote, or we need to make sure that you get your absentee ballot, right? And so what we do is we connect them with resources. How can we build your capacity to, one, reach more people and therefore turn out more people and therefore build Black political power in your community while educating our folks and also building your capacity to lead and to do the work. So we may give them a phone bank list, right? So they can call folks and they're not just, going through the phone book and saying, oh, I know this one, I know this one. No, we have a list of folks that we can connect you with a whole script. You can find out if they need a ride to vote. So one, that strengthens your ability to reach voters in your community. It may be helping them to better organize around issues outside of elections, because we know that the hard work begins the day after election, right? So how do you keep ongoing engagement in your community? How do you keep folks talking about issues? How do you raise awareness about municipal races in your community? Because if you really want to talk about how we build power and hold police accountable and address some of the environmental issues, then you need to engage our folks around municipal elections. And then leading into the culture, right? A collard green caucus.
Yes. With some hot sauce.
Cornbread and some black eyed peas, right? So investing in, over 9,000 bundles of collard greens that we purchase from Black farmers, right? Investing in local micro enterprises, Black food vendors, so that we can, make sure that our folks not only have, fresh food to prepare when you get home, but also you have a hot plate just in case, right? And then also popping in some, putting a little music on, and then also popping in some push cards around voter education. Hey, do you know that you can go early vote today? Do you know where your location is? So, all of those things. And we do our work leading with love and making sure we reinforce that our communities have the power to overcome anything and to transform our communities.
That's right. And nothing like leading with that love and the hot sauce on those collard greens. Yeah. And so, Brother John, so we know that we're in a right to work for less state. Georgia has, very weak labor laws, but we were able to do some things here in Georgia. So what is the lesson about really deeply organizing in states that don't have the same kind of union power as other places? I mean, why even bother if we're not going to be able to grow density? What do we do here? And what's our message to other people?
Well, I like the question. I think our message is, Deborah, that we can grow density, but the way we do it is by strategizing, organizing, and mobilizing, just like Reverend Orange taught us, right? I think something amazing happened during this election cycle in regards to labor. When we think about the general and we think about the runoff, oftentimes when there are critical races, you see folks parachute in from other states and they want to advise you and tell you how to run your campaign and tell you how to win.
And we used to do that now.
Whew, some of us still do it, but we also vend Canvas and we vend Phone Bank and we vend, like we move billions of dollars in a political sphere and we build zero capacity oftentimes. But what we saw different this time in Georgia and quite frankly across the country during the general is that labor invested in base building operations and base building organizations on the ground. As opposed to sending 100 folks into the ground, they identified local members and workers who were already hardest hit from the pandemic, essential workers, gave them an opportunity to work every day if they so chose to in the field or work on phone banks, work doing text messaging, and to contact their fellow brothers and sisters in labor inside the state. The other thing that we did was leave nothing off the table. So whether it was independent expenditure work that we did with New Georgia Project and America Votes Georgia, or it was doing direct engagement work, firewalls up, of course, with our C3 folks that were moving voter registration and voter education, or it was digging in with the parties. We found a way for labor to show up across the board in every instance in all 159 counties. So I think that's something that's unique that we don't always do. And, there are always going to be instances, especially in the South, where some unions have more capacity than others. That's the nature of the trades. That's the nature of the work. But in this instance, nobody did grandstanding. Nobody tried to take a bigger piece of the pie. The only thing we fought over was how many doors we knocked, how many phone calls we had, how many conversations we moved, how many folks we got registered. It was the good kind of trouble. It was the good kind of competition that led us to making sure people actually got their voices heard. And then the last thing I'll say is all of the communication, all of the marketing work, all of the digital and data work focused on members' voices who have been impacted by this. And I don't know if it was because of the uprisings from the summer or the pandemic itself, but in this moment, it felt like labor was uniquely in tune with what was happening on the ground. And seeing that firsthand gave me a lot of hope. That made me very proud. You know, we had meetings where we were able to listen to Brother Terrence run down the numbers and the data to us around Black men and Black women and people of color households, and how important it was to target those communities. Because this is the other thing. We oftentimes see large organizations like labor play to the middle. And so that means we're gonna register all the middle class, moderate, white folks we can. Well, in this moment, there was a racial justice and racial equity lens that labor applied to this work. And they sought out women of color. They specifically targeted sisters and brothers
When
to
does that
hear their
happen, right?
voices. So this is the moment. So this is the shift that allowed us to lean in and support, and not necessarily be in the front, but sometimes we lead, sometimes we follow, and sometimes we got out of the way. In this moment, we figured out how to do that well. And so I'm just very proud of how labor showed up and how we showed out.
Absolutely. And I really saw a difference in even the way labor partnered. Of course, you know, I'm a labor baby myself, and, you know, the other half of my pillow is labor. But I saw a big difference with the way labor really partnered with community-based organizations in a real authentic way. And it made a difference in the outcome. So thank you for that, John. Okay, so Chris, I love this panel. Y'all are just all smart and brilliant, you know? So Chris, as we talk about the laws, and particularly labor laws, we know that you're the political director of ACLU Georgia, and it's been a busy year. And I saw you testify yesterday. You held your cool at 8 o'clock in the morning. They were trying you though. I saw you. But so you have a lot on your plate, and you've been doing this for a long time. And, you know, voter security and voter suppression are definitely issues that we're dealing with. We know that, you know, we've been fighting voter suppression here in Georgia. I don't know if you were at Coca-Cola with us the other day when we had to do a die-in. There's about probably 300 bills now, but I think about 253 bills across the country that are targeted to suppress our vote. So these are dangerous times for us. And we know that, you know, there's anti-democratic legislation, and we know some of it is racial. And so what do we need to know about these new voting laws, or the potential of these new voting laws? How can we fight it? And what should we do right now? Because we're in this sweet moment, particularly in Georgia, where the legislative session technically may not end till March 31st. We've already had crossover day. We've already done some things in terms of calling out corporate responsibilities regarding this. What should we be doing now at this moment, and how can allies help?
Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for having me and being on this panel with some phenomenal advocates. So I'm giving you a compliment to also really say that this is your fault. Everybody who's on this panel, I know, everybody who's on this panel who turned Georgia into this great new state is because of y'all. And we knew what was going to happen next. We knew that while we were winning November 3rd, they were going to change the voting laws. We definitely knew January 5th when we sent 2 new senators up there. They're definitely coming for us. Definitely. So we knew that this was coming. So let's not play like, this is coming out of nowhere or anything else. I could have told you that. Everybody else, the racists could have told you, any and everybody could have told you they were going to change the voting laws in the state of Georgia because of the work y'all did, that we all did. So 1, it's y'all's fault. Now I got to be up at 8 a.m. every morning, up at 6 a.m. to get there at 8 a.m. every morning to fight these bills. Okay. In the state of Georgia, you said there's about 250 something. Well, you can already go with 1/4 of them being in the state of Georgia because we have over 72 anti-voting laws in our state. And I'm not even talking about the substitutes, the different amalgamations of them. That would probably push you up to around 150, 160. And we have to fight every day, literally every day, on these bills. So what are they trying to take away? The things that y'all did. Y'all taught people how to do absentee voter ballots. So they're like, it's time to take that away. Drop boxes, how to use those, advocating for that. Time to take that away. Early voting, especially souls to the polls. Time to take that away. Any and everything that you can think of. I mean, they're up here taking away line warming. Line warming. They don't want you to have water in line for these type of things. It's crazy. So we just have to be very vigilant about it throughout this process. So as you see, like even testifying, yes, I'm up there, cordial, and they're going to hit you every which way about these questions. But I know that I have on my side, as well as all of us, truth and what's right. So it's nothing new. We've been fighting this fight since we got the right to vote. 1870 was the highest number of African Americans that were ever put into office. We sent over 29 congressmen across the state, over 2,000 African Americans elected nationwide in 1870. And since then, they have been rolling back voting laws to the point where you didn't get that number again until 1993. So it really is what happens at the legislature that really does matter. The die-in at Coca-Cola, I wasn't there personally, but we sent ACLU legal observers there because we found out every time we send protesters there, the police show up and the police are harassing protesters and threatening your First Amendment rights. So we want to make sure that everybody has that. For some reason, they get scared when they see people with a blue vest on, it says legal observer, and they take out their cameras, right? Roaches run in the dark. That's where, in the light, that's what really happens. So we have to keep staying vigilant on everything. So corporate pressure down at the Capitol, any and everything that we can do to maintain what we have. And I'm just saying, this is the beginning. Like what happened in November and January, it's really just the beginning. So we have to maintain it and take it to another level. And that's how we get real change.
There you go. Well, that's what I'm talking about.
But it is y'all's fault though.
It's all of us. It's a collective we, right? And so Fanika, I think we might have lost her for a second.
While she comes back, can I add one thing to what Chris said about voter suppression?
Absolutely.
You know, we do polls around the country with Black voters regularly, and you know, on an issue list of 15 issues, voter suppression is typically number 11 or 12 for most Black voters. Not because it's not important, just because they got shit to worry about. You know, like it's a bunch of other stuff that they're worried about. And so when we force them the choice, it kind of slips down that priority list. In Georgia, voter suppression is number 4, right? It's because Brian Kemp's efforts at voter suppression were so explicit and blatant that in focus groups, people like low propensity voters can name things that he did to keep Stacey from winning. That type of profile on voter suppression, it's what I used to say when Donald Trump would go out there and say, you know, when they got ballots in the river and ballots on fire and the absentee ballots ain't gonna count. Had he just suppressed Black votes in private, the way Republicans normally do, it may have been more successful. But when we put a spotlight on that thing, the way we have in Georgia, when Black voters make voter suppression a top priority issue, then they also become more vigilant, and it adds an urgency to their vote. You're not gonna get them out of line if you tell them that they can't, that you're trying to get them out of line. And so what has happened in Georgia, creating that urgency, we have to create around the country, and we got to put pressure on Congress, because there's a federal solution to this crap that they're playing in legislatures across the country, and it's called the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much for adding that, Terrence. And Fanika, so Georgia Stand Up signed on to the great ads that Black Voters Matter put together. So how is that campaign going, and what should we be doing now?
Yes, so thank you to you
We
all
are
for
a
joining
corporate
us.
piece.
Yes, the corporate accountability campaign. So the first ad, we targeted the major corporations in Georgia, the Delta, Aflac, UPS, Southern Company,
Home Depot.
Georgia Chamber of
Coca-Cola.
Commerce. Yep, and Coca-Cola, absolutely. So asking voters, one, asking those corporations to make public bold against the voter suppression bills. Two, asking voters and folks to those corporate headquarters. And three, asking those corporations to divest all resources, all donations to any candidates who support or sponsor that legislation. And we're continuing those efforts with direct actions on the ground with our partners across the state. Our partners in Hancock County really kicked it off when they took it to the voter suppressor in chief, Barry Fleming, and asked their county commission to fire him as the county attorney in Hancock, which is 71% Black, right? And so that really just ignited the fire for the rest of our 130 partners across 75 counties in the state. So right now there are direct actions on the ground. Students from Clark Atlanta University joined our weekend of protest at World of Coca-Cola. And I don't know if you all saw that, Boycott Coke was trending #3 across, on Twitter. And although we nor any of our partners have ever asked for a boycott, the Twitterverse can do whatever they want to do. We are calling for corporate accountability. These corporations took a pledge last year, right? They said that during the summer protests around George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, that they were going to stand with Black folks against racial injustice, right, of all types and of all forms. And Black folks spend, billions of dollars within the state of Georgia. And so what we are asking them to do is make good on that pledge. We're not asking them to do anything that they haven't said that they wanted to do, or anything that is too hard for them to do. They can wade into the waters and engage in conversations around policy when they choose to. And so what we are asking them right now is, which side are you on? Are you going to stand with Black folks so that we're not criminalized as we pass out water and snacks to people in line? Are you going to stand with the Black faith community as they mobilize their parishioners to go vote on a Sunday? And against restrictions for local boards of elections to really do their jobs without the legislature trying to, take over their boards of elections. And, these bills don't just affect Black folks. These bills affect all Georgians. So we're just going to continue to apply the pressure and see where the cards may land. The other thing I want to offer too, even, regardless of the outcome, we have seen this before. We know what voter suppression looks like. We know what attacks on voting rights look like. We know what Jim Crow looks like, and we recognize this as Jim Crow 2.0, right? But what our folks do, and one of the things that we can do, because we lean into that culture and lean into the power of Black voters, is one, we matter. We know that we have power. We know what we just did, less than 9-10 weeks ago, right? So when they said back in the civil rights era, count the bubbles on soap, our folks went out and bought soap, right? So we can organize around that, right? We know what that looks like before. And we're gonna out-organize, out-mobilize, and out-strategize. And we're gonna do it again.
That's what I'm talking about. And when we talk about Black women being the base of the democracy and Black women saving the world, once again, Fanika, you're definitely in that list, on that list. So as we look at what's happening with Black women, and I know Black women have gotten a lot of shine, but there were some great, they say a few good men, but there was a lot of good men on this campaign. It was just a lot more women, but there was some good men on this campaign. So we know, of course, everyone that's on this panel, Mondale, but Terrence, let me just ask you, it's been a little shocking. It's been, interesting. It's been a different time. We've called out Donald Trump. You've called out Donald Trump. It's hard to believe that we're in this place, but can you make a statement about what you actually saw in the numbers after the votes were tabulated? Did he really win, or did he lose, or was it a toss-up? Was it really voter suppression or not? What do the numbers say?
I mean, frankly, we saw the overwhelming expression of Black power in Georgia, and it's not just Black power. It was people of color, you know, and this is, while Georgia is one of the most rapidly diversifying states in America, probably the fastest diversifying state in America, second only to Texas and Arizona. It is Black people that are diversifying Georgia. Unlike Texas and Arizona, where the coalition of people of color are making those less white states, Black people are making Georgia less white. And one of the prime examples of that, it is suburbs all around Atlanta where this is happening. And one of them, I want to just call out a couple of them, because in the 4 counties that had the highest surge in turnout, let me get my, posters like graphs, Cobb County, Gwinnett County, Fulton County, DeKalb County, the 4 highest surging counties in Georgia are all majority minority counties. Henry County, which was the highest Democratic swinging county in America in 2020, not in Georgia. The highest swing of Democratic support in America was in Henry County. From 2016 to 2020, Democrats improved by 18 points in Henry County, which is the highest increase in the country again. But the thing that we miss there, and this is why long-term investment, capacity building, the things that all of you have been doing in Georgia, things that Fair Fight and New Georgia Project have been doing, is because when you look at that 18-point swing from 16 to 20, what you miss is that 16 of those points were swung in 2018. That in fact, that was the work of Stacey Abrams registering a ton of Black folks in Henry County. That county went from 40% white electorate to 30% white electorate in 2018. That is where that swing happened. And so if you just look at the presidential, if you just look at what happened in 2020, then you miss the story of long-term and sustained capacity, long-term and sustained engagement. And that I think that's truly what we see in Georgia, and what we got to figure out how to export to Florida and to Mississippi and to South Carolina, where they have very similar demographics, a bunch of Henry counties, a bunch of Black folks that have not been activated, have not been engaged in counties outside of the urban center, in counties that have been historically Republican counties, where they don't feel like they have collective power.
That's right.
And that is what was expressed here. And we ran a lot of ads that were about collective power. We ran a lot of ads that were about what happens when we do this together. A lot of ads that pointed to, what happened when we protest together, when we vote together, we make change together. And that's really what we got to export across the Sun Belt.
And I think that's so important. And of course, we've been getting a lot of calls from groups wanting to know, what the secret sauce was and how it was done. And one of the things we share with them, it wasn't even a 1 or 2 year deal or 3 years. And, we know, and I've been doing this with Georgia Stand Up for 16 years and was doing it before that, and Helen Butler and, all these folks. But part of what we know is for everyone that we register, or every 5 people we register, we can expect that they're going to suppress or throw out at least 3 of those votes. So it's register people to vote, rinse and repeat, keep going, and build that base. We also know that there's been a reverse migration. My family moved back south. A number of our families moved back south. And I think because of the census undercount in 2010, we were the sleeping giant, and because the affordability of the city of Atlanta, it pushed people into the suburbs that they weren't adequately counting us or counting on us. And because we don't have the same political overlay in the suburbs as the inner city, they really couldn't count that power. So that was a secret piece to this. So as we have homecoming festivals, literally saying to come back south and come back to Georgia, we need to be really clear about the counties we want our cousins to move in and those that they can afford. So I think that the demographic shift and the unaffordability, this is the highest Atlanta, it's a battle between rich and poor, if you will. And so we know our folks who are moving back to the South tend to have a higher income than those that are actually born here. And so as we're righting some of these wrongs, we can't forget our cousins that are actually born and bred here in Georgia. We have to keep empowering them as we keep building this political power.
Then Deborah,
Yes.
can I say one piece on
Absolutely.
I loved you mentioned Georgia, not just Atlanta. And then Terrence, I loved you talking about 2018. See, the reality is we have 159 counties in Georgia. And so it's the organizations like Black Voters Matter, like Black Male Voter Project, like GCPA, like New Georgia Project, who are moving around to all 159 of these counties, reaching out to the brothers and sisters in these spaces, making sure that their voices are heard as well. That's critical. And we know that this is a 30 or 40 or 50-year cycle of voter empowerment that, is born out of the work of, Dorothy Height, Rita Samuels, Dr. Lowry, Mrs. Lowry, Reverend Orange, like all of those leaders who trained so many of us and poured into so many of us. This is Operation Big Vote for Melanie Campbell showing up again. You know what I'm saying? This is Felicia Davis in Clayton County ringing the bell when everyone else said, what are we going to do? This is Deborah Scott in Clayton County when everyone else said, what are we going to do? This is, the organizations and the investment and the time and the energy and the meticulous constant gardening that has never stopped. Even in the face of tremendous oppression, it has never stopped. And then lastly, it is the sense of hope and care and pushing back against the narrative of futility, proving that when we stand up and make action happen, something good comes from it, right? So that's what this cycle showed us. And that's what the next cycle is going to show us and the cycle after that. And so we think it's imperative that we don't have multi-cycle investment, but we have multi-decade investment. You can't look at the ground and say, oh, well, we didn't win that race. See, if people have said we didn't win the Abrams race for governor, it's a wrap, roll up shop and go home, we never would have got to 2 senators in Georgia. We never would have gotten to Biden, Harris in the White House. So it's that intentional investment that I think is going to get us where we have to be.
And I think you're so right, John. And just like we talked about, labor not coming in and out and parachuting in and dumping the stuff, we used to dump it in the trash when we leave because we can't leave it with the community. But I think we have to do the same way in terms of funding these nonprofit organizations. We parachute in, we give money, even individual donors. We had more individual donors than ever before in our 15 years. I mean, people were given those little small checks to big checks, but then that goes away after the election, and then we're left starving again until the next cycle. And then, hurry up and ramp up. It's the month before the election. So we need to make sure that we, 2 kinds of power, organize people and organize money. We know that labor unions and foundations have organized money. So we need to have a strategy that's going to say, we're going to make sure we build this infrastructure and continue to build this infrastructure and have a Southern strategy, if you will, for the next 10 to 15, 20 years. We have to be intentional about building that, right? Like right now, right? Because, as we're passing this information on, this is a continuum of a movement. It didn't just start in 2018 or even now. This is Rosa Parks. This is the civil rights movement as a continuum. They worked hard. We have to work hard. They rolled back the clock after Reconstruction. They're rolling back the clock, but we have to keep fighting on and we can't get tired. So you're right on. John, and as you have the floor, let me just ask you about the disinformation that has happened with these campaigns and social media and the way in which social media played in terms of putting out negative information and bad information online. Can you talk to us a little bit about that so we can be prepared for that in the future?
Absolutely. I think the reality is if we listen to what social media had to say, then Biden and Harris were about to lock all of us up the day they got elected. And, let's be clear. I am not a bandwagon fan of any elected official. I hold everybody accountable based off of their record. But I think we get into dangerous territory when the media outlets and the narrative and the echo chamber that is being created, one is white-led, white-driven, whitewashed, white-filtered. Two, when all of the data, we need Black consultants, Terrence, we need to triplicate you, not duplicate you. There is an unconscious bias that goes into how you do data based on your socialization and your experiences. So when we see a narrative about a Kamala Harris that plays on driving a wedge between Black men and this sister who identifies as a sister, there's a challenge there. Now, are there things that we have to deal with? Of course there are, but we'll deal with those things. And you can't tell me that we're in the same position we were under a Trump administration, because we're not. $1.9 trillion just got moved. That wouldn't have moved for us. That would have moved in tax cuts to rich folks. So the narrative around what we were going to get out of a Biden-Harris administration, the narrative around business as usual in a political scheme, and the narrative around no matter what we did, nothing would change, was so devastating. But the power of sisters and brothers who supported sisters, when Deltas and AKAs, I don't care how much negative media came out of the right, you wasn't beating Chucks and Pearls. It was not gonna happen. It was not gonna happen. When you saw sisters who had real critique of Kamala Harris say there is somebody in the White House in the second highest seat who looks like me, you're not gonna beat that. But the way we make sure they don't beat it is if we continue to register, we continue to educate, we continue to move our own messaging. It is the work that Terrence and other Black consultants did to create infographics, to create data and surveys, to create information for us that we could then put out on Instagram, on Facebook. Young people moving conversations. I saw stickers, brothers and sisters on the street listening to Jeezy, listening to Gucci, wearing stickers that said, I voted. Wearing stickers that said, Black Power. Wearing stickers that said, who's afraid of Black Power? These are messages and moments that captured our community because we didn't listen to someone else shape our narrative. We shaped our own narrative. We didn't let them tell us that we couldn't say the word y'all. When we got to that runoff election and the infographics went out with that giant peach and they said, we did that, y'all. Let's do it again on January 5th. People recognize the power of that because it spoke to us.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Oh, this is a good panel. I like y'all. And so, and Will, because, and I'm surrounded by these young folks, and I just learned about TikTok this year. I had no idea what a TikTok was. I thought they were saying tic-tac-toe when they first started. And so there are these new tools and strategy that the next generation are using effectively. And I guess it's going to be the new way in which we communicate, or one of the new ways in which we communicate, or you all communicate. What are some other things that you all did or should do, or we should employ going forward in terms of making sure that we reach your generation?
Yeah, definitely just knowing the power of star power. And so even the small things like the many concerts that and pop-up shops that were happening, people within, millennials and within my generation, everyone kind of just gravitates towards what's in or what's going on. And so I don't want to say they want to ride the trend, except this is a positive wave and a positive trend that we want to ride. And so you guys are talking about making the narrative for decades to come. And so that's starting now. So by the time the kids that just voted for the first time, my youngest brother's 18. So I took him to the poll to vote for the first time. And so looking to see when he's my age, when he's 28, 38, 48, knowing that my older brother worked on this election, he forced me to go to the poll. I didn't believe in voting. He's going through this whole conspiracy phase right now. So he didn't believe in voting. And I kind of just showed him, I sat down and showed him how everything worked. And then when it came down to like ballot carrying, showing him how close these elections were, And when we launched our ballot carrying operation, we carried close to 160 ballots. It's him seeing how close these votes got down to, him saying that Clayton County kind of pushed through and won the race. And for a young Black male growing up on the west side of Atlanta, that really opened up his eyes. Except now he's a freshman in college at Valdosta State, and he's still taking that same message down there. So now that he's in rural Georgia, he's been in the city his entire life, it looks different. He's not seeing the same voter activists marching past his house every day. He's not right up the street from the Capitol every day. And so him just trying to translate that to on campus. And so one thing that I want to kind of be adamant about going into 2022 is getting on these college campuses. So by me working with the HBCUs and ESPN, I'm really trying to push towards just different activations. And so all these tailgates that'll be happening. I'm over the HBCU National Championship game and kickoff game. And so seeing if we can just have a voter registration table out there, seeing if we can incentivize anything, because people my age, black folks, period, love free stuff. They love incentives. And so just incentivizing, if someone is registered to vote, we're not telling you who you got to vote for, but just incentivizing, making sure you're registered to vote, making sure your voter registration information is correct, just making sure everyone is up to date so that when 2022 comes around, we can definitely tackle that and keep it moving for decades to come.
So how do you use technology? I mean, are you all on TikTok? What else are you using what platform should we be using to reach your generation?
Yeah, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Clubhouse has a run going right now as well. So Clubhouse is pretty much where anybody can start a room and just have these open conversations like this. Is no video involved. And so you can put a topic up, people can join it and go that way. But Instagram and Twitter really opens up that room for conversation as well as what you're seeing. And so like the Instagram story feature definitely was utilized a lot in this last campaign. And so like we were talking about those infographics, someone might not have time to read up on someone's entire platform. And so if this infographic pops up on their Instagram timeline, or if they're tapping through a story and they see an infographic, they're going to be more inclined to stop and read through it than reading a full news article on what each candidate stands for. And so I hate to say it, but we hate to read. And so by us hating to read, we want to get the message as short and simple as possible. And so these infographics, by them just popping up on our screen and them having 1, 2, 3, the main 3 things that this candidate is running for, that's going to stick to someone once they get to the ballot. And so same way Warnock was saying, his name was last, so he's going to be last on the ballot. That resonated with a lot of people, and they knew to scroll to the bottom of the ballot. But that was an infographic that just went through. And so looking at things like that, and also just sharing things. And so I posted something about the election, and it had a little bit over 41,000 impressions, and I have less than 4,000 followers on Instagram. And so someone with a solid platform with 10,000 plus is no telling how many impressions they'll receive just by resharing something or getting the message out. And so those infographics and definitely sharing on Instagram, Twitter, Clubhouse, that stuff definitely reaches the masses.
So we have to invest in young folks. We have to give them the tools that they use, not expect them to use the tools that we use, lean into their way of communicating. One of the things when we were out in the streets this summer during the uprising is, we helped with a lot of the marshals in some of these marches. And so on the back of our shirts, we had the QR codes for voter registration. And I noticed that, your generation prefers the QR codes and the bit.lys and registering online. And we're so used to using the paper registration. And it's like, no, I'll just do it online. But we want that accountability. So I'm so glad that we now have the bit.lys and the QR codes, because that speaks to their language, because they're not going to have a pen and they're not going to write it down the way in which our generation wrote down everything. So thank you for sharing that. So Chris, as we talk about these numbers, and we know that Georgia is not the only state that is dealing with these voter suppression laws. Pennsylvania has 14 bills. New Hampshire has some. Missouri, New Jersey, Texas. They're not far behind. And we know it's really about taking people back to the Jim Crow era. So can we depend on the courts to save us? If we say, what happens if these bills pass? What is our next step? And then what's the role of the courts? And then I think Terrence mentioned, what's the role of Congress if these things go through, and even the role of the president in this case? What can we do to ensure that if they do pass these regressive bills, that we still have a fighting chance?
Let me go all the way back. Thank you for that question. So again, the reason why we're here is because of civic engagement within it. So we're talking about people who are working on elections and campaigns. I'm gonna take another view of people who actually worked as poll workers. So we know Georgia literally had the worst primary in the entire nation on June 9th, right? We thought Iowa was bad. Georgia was like, hold my beer. I'm about to outdo all of y'all. Where you had lines so long that the last person to vote in the June 9th primary didn't vote on June 9th. They voted on June 10th at 12:21 a.m. because they waited over 6 hours in line. So all the organizers, again, did a phenomenal job of saying, we're going to bulk back on people who were working at the polls who said, I don't want to anymore, because the average age of a poll worker in the state of Georgia was 72 years old. During a pandemic that was killing elderly people. So the college students, the professionals, everyone who said, I'm going to become a poll worker in my community. You're not going to do voter suppression in your community if you're the one who's there. You're going to make it easier for people to vote. So that's what really changed within it. And there were court challenges there of telling people you can't register this many people to vote. One of the bills that's happening right now is saying third parties can no longer give money to Board of Elections. Why? That's crazy. I was asked a question earlier this week about having people be able to request absentee ballots at the last minute. I was like, well, the governor did. Governor Brian Kemp himself was supposedly contaminated with COVID-19. He didn't know, but he was quarantined. And the Friday before the election, he requested a ballot and he got it in time. And now they're trying to take that away. I was like, I'm just trying to make sure the governor can vote just like everybody else. But those are the issues that they're trying to do and get into. The courts have sided sometimes with us, but most of the times they don't. And you can blame Donald Trump and 4 years of that. If there's anything I have to say is evil is very effective. Donald Trump and McConnell has been able to appoint more federal judges in this amount of time than anybody else in the history of the United States. So can we depend on the courts? No. I'm gonna say up front, no. And we shouldn't depend on the courts in the first place. It's upon us to hold our elected officials accountable. Just like people said it was impossible for Georgia to turn blue. Well, people are saying it's impossible to stop the legislature because it's all Republican. It's not. It's really not. And if we dig down deep, we can really stop it. But we also have to hold pressure. When we're talking about HR 1 in the federal Congress, that needs to pass, and it needs to pass now. Because if it doesn't, and we don't reinstitute pre-clearance, where the Department of Justice has to overlook everything that happens within changes within discriminatory states. We know that since Shelby v. Ferguson on, when was that, 2013, we've had over 200 polling locations closed in the state of Georgia. That was because you did not have a Department of Justice review. Those are the type of things that really make a difference within it. Now, we overcame that because of amazing organizers there, but why do all that? Why can't we just let people vote? So again, pre-clearance needs to go through. And of course, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, that has to go through to uphold our civil rights and civil liberties. Do you guys ever just sit back for a second and say, it's 2021. Why are we still fighting for the right to vote? Why are Black people still not equitable in this country? We have to continue this fight, because I want the generations to come not to deal with this. They should be dealing with other things such as raising families, being better at their jobs and profession, not being shot down in the street like Ahmaud Arbery and murdered, not being harassed by police officers. And we can stop that. And I truly do believe we can stop that within our generation if we hold our elected officials accountable and continue to organize.
Good deal. Good deal. So Fanika, I know Black Voters Matter has a big agenda for 2021 and 2022. And you never took a break, and we never had a chance to rest. January 5th happened, and then January 6th happened, and then a couple of weeks later the legislature went into session, and it looks like we're gonna drag it out through the whole month. But we have the municipal elections ahead all across the state. We have a lot going on, and there's still base building that needs to be done. One of the sweet spots about Black Voters Matter is you all speak directly to Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Jackson in terms and ways in which they understand. And I love when they speak to each other about voting. There's nothing like that conversation. So what are the plans for Black Voters Matter going forward?
Yeah, so we definitely do use our authentic voices to speak to our folks on the ground. I love what everybody here has said. Definitely felt like a little bit of a bobblehead as John was talking about, calling out counties across the state. But yeah, as we're talking to folks over in Dodge and Black Voices of Dodge and Eastman and across the state, this is a year of capacity building. So how we can strengthen their ability to do the good work, right? A lot of our partners have expressed that they want to know more about legislative policy, right? They want to understand how these things are working in the Georgia legislature. And so our goal is to make them mini advocates so that, they can out advocate us of a job, right? And, looking at the 1,500 municipal races that are happening across the state of Georgia, who are going to be the best candidates that are going to address the issues that our partners are concerned with in their communities. And then connecting our partners with resources and expanding their networks, right? Around environmental justice. Just on a call the other night, one of our partners down in Waycross, she expressed that Waycross has some of the highest rates of youth cancer based on some soil pollution. So environmental issues and connecting folks to understand that environmental justice has a racial element as well, right? It's not just utilities. It's folks over in Houston County who just found out last week that they have level 1 gas leaks at a predominantly Black school that has not been addressed, in 5 or 6 months. So how we help our people to message around issues, then engage the community around those issues, and then build political power around that. So it is a full-on capacity building year. The hard work begins the day after election, as you just shared, and we haven't had an opportunity to rest. We don't plan to rest. And so, we say can't stop, won't stop around here.
But we do have to practice self-care. All of us, we're doing terribly at that. That work-family balance and self-care is going by the wayside. We need to work on that. So I have some questions from the audience, and we're gonna do this almost in rapid fire because we're at 7:37. And so I'm gonna ask you all a couple of the same questions, right? So that we can get different responses. So besides the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, what else do we want our senators, our 2 new senators that we put in? And so I'm not sure whether you all have had conversations with them yet. They certainly haven't called me yet, but we will be calling on them. And so what must we be telling and what must we be saying to our new senators that other folks have said that we helped to put them there? What should we be doing and what should we be saying to them? And that's for everyone. Let's start with Terrence and go to Terrence, Will, John, Fanika, Chris, and go from there.
All right, well, look, I have a list from our last poll. Our last poll in Georgia before the runoff, we asked, here's a list of bills that were passed by a Democratic House, but that are resting in a McConnell graveyard and have never been brought to the floor. Which of these are most important for Jon Ossoff and Reverend Warnock? So we got a list for them. When they call you, tell them we got the list. In this order: Protecting Americans with Pre-Existing Conditions Act, the COVID Care Act, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and the Violence Against Women's Act are amongst the top priorities of Black voters in Georgia, and exactly where they want to see the 2 senators that Black folks sent to Washington. This is exactly where Black voters are expecting them to prioritize their efforts.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with Terrence. Just looking at when we re-showed the movie Good Trouble, a lot of people were looking at it like these are still things that we face to this day, and so it's kind of like the Flint water crisis. People make movies on stuff that's still going on, and so we just need to get past all of that, and it's showing to lead by example. And so by all of us being in the field, we help get these senators there, and they asked for us to put our shoes on, put our boots on, and get out here and get on the ground. So now that we got them there, it's time for them to kind of put in the same work.
That's right, John.
Well, I love that. I love both of those responses. So we're pretty clear on this. Number one is we are fighting for 15, and I'm happy to say that both of our senators voted the right way on the American Rescue Plan, Package 1, and supported that. And while we didn't get there, we did get state and local aid. Like I said, we were able to land $1.9 trillion in that first package, but we're also thinking about the Build Back Better package. We're thinking about package 2. We know how important it is that care workers show up in that package. We understand the importance of the intersection of almost 83% of care workers in this country being women, and mostly women of color, many being immigrant and not having any support. They didn't show up in the CARES Act. We want to make sure that care workers show up inside of this Build Back Better. We also understand that there is a convergence between care, between climate, between immigration, and between voting rights. And we think that there's a racial justice narrative, a thread that pulls all of that together. But it is essential that we make sure care workers show up in this second package. And as we move out of this second package, we've got to create the space for jobs, not just run-of-the-mill $5, $7, $8 an hour jobs. We need quality jobs that you can raise a family on, and not just jobs for white men. We need jobs and resource for Black women, for communities of colors, for immigrants in this country. We have to make sure that we are resourcing the work of the people that kept this economy going, the essential workers that kept us moving during the pandemic.
Good deal. And Kanika, I'm going to change the question for you. And what should organizations be doing to prepare for 2022? And I know what Black Voters Matter, but what is your advice to us and other organizations that are out there that are needing to build for 2022? What should we be doing?
One, I loved your earlier point that we need to stress to funders that we need the same level of investment this year in order to really and truly build our capacity moving into 2022. And then I think we need to trust local infrastructure. We need to make sure that folks on the ground, we are strengthening their capacity in order to lead change in their communities. Because look, people, they know what they want. They know what their communities need. They don't need for us to swoop in and tell them. We need to be in a position to empower them, to equip them with the tools and the skills and the resources that they need to build so that we can build back better. And we need to be in listen mode. So the funding, the investment and the trusting in local infrastructure, and then finally messaging and accountability, making sure that, all of us are like policy wonks, for the most part, right? And we understand how to speak the lingo, but we need to make it plain. We need to put it where the goats can get it so that our folks on the ground can understand how to craft messaging, how to craft the message around public safety is an economic issue, and how is a job created in your community, and how your economic development authorities can hold corporations or companies looking to invest in your communities to $15 per hour jobs instead of $7.25 per hour jobs, right? Or, again, how, participating and engaging around municipal elections is really how you build local power. So the investment, the supporting local infrastructure, and accountability with messaging.
I love it. I love it. And Chris, so, you already said that you're not confident in the courts. And so we have, in terms of beating back voter suppression. So we have this window here in Georgia where, we're less than a week or two away from the legislature being over. And then we have other states and cities watching us, right? And so all eyes are on Georgia. So as goes Georgia, as goes the rest of the South, and maybe the rest of the country. So what strategically should we be doing now? And how can we help? How can other people help with this fight right now? And then, how do we take these lessons back to the state? And then after you answer that question, we're going to go really fast with 30-second answers because I have some other questions for you. We're trying to get as much in as possible. So I want you all to think about what is the thing that you want me to ask you that no one asked you. And I wish they would ask me that question. So think about that question, and then we're going to go there. Okay, Chris.
Yeah, I'll be brief too, because I get this question all the time. Georgia is the highlight of the nation, so I get calls from all across the nation too, especially from the ACLU. We have affiliates all across the nation, especially the South. I just got off the phone with the political director for the ACLU of Florida, and they're like, you guys have a great program going on with what's going on with putting in corporate pressure. How is it done? I was like, well, it's done by Black people, Kurt, and you're white. So do you have more Black people on your staff that can really organize around this stuff? Just calling them out about it, right? Because there's not many Black political directors in the ACLU, period. So now that we're at this point, people are looking again, like everyone said, what are Black people doing? I think that we need to continue corporate pressure all the time, right? If they are, like they said over the summer, like was said before, saying that they're going to be about racial justice, then hold them accountable. This is the time that they need to say it. And they do hold that power within the legislature. They give hundreds of thousands of dollars to these individuals. You need to cut that off and turn on people who actually do vote in a way that helps out Black people. If we don't hold them accountable, they're just going to continuously go. Okay, so we need to create that atmosphere. The other shout out I want to give out to all y'all are amazing advocates, thinking about the community and everything else. I need them to relieve my student loan debt. Okay, I need that is exactly, I don't know why y'all missed that. I need this money. Yeah,
Right
okay?
now.
Exactly, right now. So we need to get all that,
That's the
messaging it
reparations
to
we
people.
need yes to now, right?
Yes to now. Let's do it.
Right. Particularly to those that they say help to shift this country, if you can thank us directly by erasing that debt right now. Okay, so Will, rapid fire. What is it that we need to know?
Well, mine was actually student debt. And so Chris kind of threw that out, but I'm a recent graduate. And so all of a lot of the workers that were on the ground were still students. And so they were kind of banking on that whole Bernie Sanders thing with eliminating student debt. And then when Joe got there, they're like, oh man, he's not going to relieve student debt. And so student debt is definitely something that we're looking forward to. I saw his interview with him when he said how much he was willing to relieve. And some people were okay with it. Some people weren't okay with it. I went to a state institution, so I'm okay with whatever he relieves. So my tuition was only $8,000, whereas my sister who went to Spelman, she in a different belt. So so that's another reason why I'm working on the HBCU side of ESPN. So we just want, student debt, but also more resources and ways for people to learn how to register to vote on these student campuses. Because, like, for instance, North Carolina A&T has the highest enrollment rate out of HBCUs right now, except it's not that many people up there that are registering people. And so just trying to see how we can mobilize as a country and not necessarily just as the state of Georgia.
Good deal. And I know one of the issues on campus is if you're from another state, we've had problems, particularly in the AU Center, and I'm a graduate of Clark. Shout out to Clark Atlanta University. But they have to keep their registration at home, or they're told that they need to do that. And so there's always an issue with getting IDs, state schools versus HBCUs. So that's an issue we need to take care of as well. All right, and so the numbers, tell us about the numbers as we look at building this this future. And I know we're doing rapid fire, but focus on the data and the numbers, Terrence, and tell us what we need to be mindful of going forward.
Well, first things first, student loan debt. I'm gonna just go ahead and second that. As a Morris College alum, that is heavy. The debt is heavy. And the most important thing I think that we can do, I'm sorry, the question that I wish that I would have been asked is how do we sustain this power? All this power that we've created, how do we sustain it? And Deborah, we've talked about this on previous panels. We have to take the victory lap. Every one of you has activated voters, has promised voters what would happen to them if they voted, what could happen to their communities. We made promises, we set expectations. They exceeded those expectations.
Yes, they did.
And now we have to go say thank you.
Yes.
We have to go, America needs to thank Georgia. And it starts with the people that activated them. It starts with the organizations that got them off the sideline and pulled them into this game. We have to go back and thank them and then show them, thank you for voting because you flipped Georgia, and because you flipped Georgia, $1.9 trillion. Because you flipped Georgia, within a week of becoming president, he established a racial justice task force. Because you flipped Georgia, we have an attorney general that will actually hold, that will actually enforce the criminal justice reforms that were started under the Holder administration. We have to thank them and we have to connect them to the changes that have impact on their lives. Because as long as I'm in focus groups asking people, how has your life gotten better from voting? And they can't answer it, we're not going to be able to go back and ask them to do it again.
So we gotta share with them what they've done, right? Go back and thank them. That's right. That's right. Okay, so as we're getting ready to close out, we have to take a collective deep breath. This may be the only break we get, at the end of these panels. And so I want you to finish this sentence, because sometimes we don't do a great job of collaborating in real time. And John, you and I have had that discussion many times and we work through it. But sometimes, we're flying the plane and building it at the same time, right? And so of course the narrative is we all did this all together. We had a plan and a strategy and, blah, 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 blah. But really everybody else really wants to know, well, what did you all do? And we know that most of us, we did what we knew how to do, what we've been trained to do, what the data told us to do, but we were doing it in real time. And so now we get to reflect on, okay, if we did that, what can we do better the next time? And because the next time is right around the corner. So as we build coalitions and continue to build these coalitions, the first question is just real quick, John, what can we do to build stronger coalitions?
We can make sure that the false narrative about the gap between Black men and Black women is shut down, and that we have more and more brothers working with sisters out in these streets, showing that unity, showing that love. Because when we are within 10 percentage points of each other voting, we bring it home. We know that, and we showed that.
There you go. Benika, y'all have the blackest bus in America and a whole lot of fleet. You have minivans and minibuses and all kinds of stuff. I think you all ran a brilliant campaign, but it's not over. And oftentimes, some of our elected officials look like us. And what do they say? Sometimes our kin folks ain't our skin folks, or sometimes our skin folks ain't our real kin folks. And we're going into the municipal elections. How can we take these kitchen table issues and make them real for this next election and continue to build this momentum?
Again, in the campaign world, you would say messaging and money. And it's the same thing that works over here too, right? The same level of investment and breaking that message down so our folks, like the Bible says, write the vision and make it plain, but folks forget so the messenger can run, right? So we write the vision, we make it plain, and then we put it where the goats can get it. And then the other thing is, we have the blackest fleet in America. It's wrapped. The two things on our buses say love and power. It's about us. So building stronger coalitions, having more of these, chat sessions where we can kind of talk, strategize, debrief, and come up with strategies so that we can anticipate what's going to happen instead of playing the defense about things that happen. And then the final thing that I'd say is that there's no path to building a more progressive Georgia that doesn't run through Black voters. And so we have to lean into that.
Okay, good deal. All right, Chris, your final question is, how can we help and what should we do next to continue to build this power?
Great question. Again, we got the wins from the previous election. Now we have to make that fight in the legislature. Like you said, March 31st is the last day. And it's not just about voter suppression. There's a bill right now about teaching people in driver's ed how to interact with the police by police officers, but they're not going to apprise you of your constitutional rights or anything else. We have to fight and kill that bill. There's another bill about religious exemptions in the state of Georgia, where if the governor does call for another pandemic or quarantine or something, churches can still go in and literally put everybody in danger. We have to kill that bill. There are so many other bills out there besides just voter suppression. Although voter suppression is the #1 issue, so we can relieve these type of bills. I want to make sure that everybody is aware this is a redistricting year, something that happens every 10 years, and all the games that you made can be completely wiped out with surgical precision, because you got people like Terrence on the other side who know exactly how to draw maps where you got elected officials and everything else, that gets taken away. So we have to be very vigilant when it comes to redistricting and the process. If you want to know how unfair the process is about redistricting in the state of Georgia, we don't, because they haven't even come up with the rules about it, and because they're going to do whatever they want unless we hold them accountable. So let's make sure that we hold the power that we have so far, because there is every check of the way, which we should be used to as Black people, every check of the way that you try to get rights or anything else, they're going to fight you tooth and nail. We just got to continue to fight all of that. I tell people it's December 125th of 2020, because we're not over yet. So let's just keep fighting together.
Love it. So in closing, one of the things I want to ask you all is just give us one more word of inspiration as you give us your email or your website, whatever you want to tell us on how we can follow you and connect with you, and if there's one thing you want us to do. And so we will start with, let's start with Will.
I think it's just going to be support the youth. So it's our generation coming up, and a lot of us are starting to mobilize and kind of get out here, and we just need support, whether it's financially, spiritually, emotionally, physically. We just need support. So that's my final thing, because I had a whole lot of support going through this, from my girl to my family to everybody, when I was working those 80 hours a week just to try to turn Georgia blue. So just continue to support us. I thank you guys for having me. You guys can follow me on Instagram at Will the Connect, and my email is willharper18@gmail.com.
Good deal. Terrence, the role of polling and data, but what's the thing you want to leave us with?
I can't, first of all, I want to just thank this panel. This is very inspirational. Thank you, Marchon, for having us. Thank you all for the work that you continue to do in Georgia. My final word was my last word, and that's victory lap. We have to go and thank the voters that made history here. And in everything that we do for the rest of this year, it should start with thank you. Thank you for voting in 2020. And now we got to go and protect that vote in the legislature. Thank you for voting in 2020. And now we got to do it again in 2022. Thank you for voting in 2020, because now we got COVID stimulus. Whatever you say should start with thank you, because that's our culture, right? That's who we are. It's gratitude. And Black, and that's what I appreciate the most about Black Voters Matters, is leaning into that culture and not shying away from that. Thank you is a part of how we acknowledge the impacts that folks have had for us. And so thank you all for having me here, and thank you, Georgia, from the bottom of the heart to the rest of the country. We appreciate you.
All right, real quick, John.
So I'm gonna say love, because we did that, y'all. And we're going to do it again. The reality that we see the intersection of race and the economy, labor and community coming together, breaking down those silos, is powerful. So I think we just have to keep doing that. As long as we do that, we will win. Y'all can reach me at john.taylor@seiu.org, or you can check out what our community groups are doing at Black Male Georgia, Black Male Initiative Georgia at bmigeorgia.org.
All right. I'm gonna skip to Chris and then come back to Fanika. Chris,
Yeah, I'll be
word.
very brief. Yeah, just stay black. Okay.
Stay black.
It's definitely a vibe. Anytime somebody asks how you doing, I'm black. Okay.
And
Happy to be a
proud.
black man. Always happy to be here. And that's what we have to do. Continue to uplift people and saying, yeah, it's hard to be black in America, but I wouldn't be anything else.
Ooh.
I love it. I love my people. I love black women. I love it all. Okay. And we're going to continuously grow and continue. This is the beginning. Okay. And as long as we continue to fight, we will reap the fruits of our labor by saying thank you, but also saying we got to continue on as well. So stay black, y'all.
That's right. Stay black. All right, Fanika.
Yeah, I love all of the points. Mine would be build power 365. Never stop leaning into that, leading with the love and knowing that we matter. And we can build power 365 days a year. You all can connect with me on Instagram and at Fanika Miller, on Twitter at SisterFire1, and the email at fanika@blackvotersmatterfund.org.
I love it. So again, I'd like to thank the panelists for being here tonight for this important discussion. Of course, I'd like to thank everyone that was watching. We learned a lot tonight about democracy, and it doesn't just happen every 4 years. It's a continuation. We know that John Lewis just passed, but he said democracy is not a state, it's an act, and each generation must do its part. You all have certainly done your part and will continue to do your part. It means we must stay engaged in this democracy every day if we want it to get stronger and better and fairer and represent us all. And so in the coming months and years, we're going to continue to work together to make America great again for us. We haven't had it great yet for us, but it's about to be. We're going to keep hope alive. I want to thank you all for having me. I would say peace and power, and continue on the fight. And thank you so much. Andy, I'll turn it over to you, Andy. Thank you.
I know we're at the hour, so I'm just going to stop it. I have to thank you, all the panelists. Deborah, you are, you're amazing. You're a rock star. You've done a great job here, but I'm telling you guys, I'm so excited. This panel discussion was fabulous. We're having a similar panel next Thursday with a discussion about Florida. So I invite all of you to join. It's going to be equally as interesting and insightful and inspiring. Thank you all so very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.